Oh, wow. Hello, everyone. It's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. At this point, I wished I wasn't live because I will pick that ink pen up. That happens. Let me make sure I am up. I'm seeing myself moving and shaking, so that's good. And let me check my volume once before I go live. I'm sorry I do this on air, but I don't want to take any chances that I do an entire video again with my volume off. All right, everything is up. And I fall back. So I have an amazing guest that's going to come onto the show. And by the way, before I even start into that, I would like to thank all patrons, all people who donate super cash, all people who like my videos, all people who share my videos. You guys are immensely appreciated. I've said before, I'm trying to expand the channel. This has been like a part-time position, so I'm trying to make this an actual part-time position with ideas on becoming full-time. But in the beginning, you guys make it all possible, so thank you very much. That's the first part. The second part to this is notifications. So I've been seeing people saying they haven't been getting the notifications. So please make sure you hit the little bell at the bottom in addition to subscribing, because apparently just a subscription doesn't necessarily mean that a person will get a notification when you do live videos. And I tend to do live videos at any random moment that strikes my fancy. So please hit the bell to make sure you can catch these. I will be stabilizing a time frame, something like 5 o'clock every day to do a live video, and maybe do like a live show and then kind of break it up, or just do segments of shows throughout the course of that hour after 5 p.m. But however it's going to be done, I still like doing live videos whenever it hits me. It's like the impetus is there, and use that impetus. So please hit the bell. So now that all of the official stuff is over with, all of the work part, I have an amazing guest that's going to be on the show. An amazing guest. Roxanne Meadows of the Venus Foundation, of the Venus Project, is going to be on the show February 6th at 5 p.m. I think that's on Tuesday. So Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday is February 6th, 5 p.m. Eastern. Roxanne Meadows of the Venus Project will be on the show. Roxanne Meadows worked with Jack Fresco for God knows how long, like 20 years or more, on this project. And even though Jack Fresco, unfortunately, is no longer here with us, she's here, and she's still running the project. That project is still open for people to visit on Saturdays. You go down to Venus, Florida, you can go in and you can see a mock-up representation of the project itself. I really want it to go. And when I get the opportunity, I'm going, and I'm going to do a video there. But in short term, she's been polite enough and nice enough to allow me to interview her on this show and open herself up to questions from the audience. I sent her a list of things that I want to know, meaning questions. And I usually don't do that, but she asked for the questions. Most people don't ask me for questions. So I put some thought into what I'm going to ask her, and I sent her the things that I wanted to know. Some questions are a little bit more challenging than others, but they're the questions I would have wanted to ask. So February 6th, 5 p.m., Roxanne Meadows, the Venus Project. She will be here live for questions and for a few audience questions. It's going to be awesome. So just for people who don't know what the Venus Project is, the Venus Project is a reimagining of society, what and how we organize ourselves. Now, I often say, and to put in perspective of how I view this, people often consider chess to be similar to life. Chess players will go into these long diatribes about how chess and life are related and how the puzzles. So this is hard to get across to somebody who don't play. But the dilemmas that you find yourself in chess games correspond extraordinarily nicely to the situations you find yourself in life. And when you play the game, you get to see these correlations, these beautiful correlations between the game itself and the situation, the three-dimensional reality to which we find ourselves. You can add fourth dimension of time. I use this analogy because in chess, there's a more of a simplified form of this. You have a finite game space. And in that finite game space, you have objectives, one main objective. Within that one main objective, you have other smaller objectives. But the one main objective, don't die. Kill the opponent. Your objective is straightforward. Checkmate that guy's king, while at the same token, not allowing you to die in the process of doing it. Everything else is subordinate to that particular process. Now, in life, it's a little bit more difficult. It's a little bit more complicated. You have all sorts of ideas on what people should do, how people should live, and everything else. You can't add God into that. Those ideas belong to us. So if that's true, how do you figure this out from the standpoint of life? And how do you figure out the rule set? One main rule set, regardless of anything else. One main rule set. If you die, you've lost the game. If you die, you've lost the game. And I don't mean die from the human being, just from the individual standpoint. I'm talking about if you blink out of existence. No, there is no God to add value to any particular thing. Meaning there's nothing external from us to say that human beings or plants or trees or anything else is value. Nothing. We give that stuff value. That's us. We make the determination on what is valuable to us, what's important. And that's from an individual standpoint, from a larger context. If you do something that causes that capacity to even have that choice of good, bad, or anything else, you lose the game. The player that has done something that destroys life, fundamentally loses the game. It doesn't matter if there's some external from us that gives us value. It doesn't matter if we ourselves give things value. If the thing that has a capacity to give something value loses the capacity to give something value because that thing no longer exists, I would argue that you've lost the game. You've lost. Whatever value system, whatever point of view, whatever way that you believe that humanity should be organized and arranged, however you weigh these things, the scales that you use to weigh these things, we should be able to agree upon one point. If you're making choices and making decisions that causes the destruction of mankind, meaning there is nothing to weep for us, there will be nothing to weep for humanity if humanity is not here. In the same way, you had a universe that didn't look at all, that cared not one iota in the sense of having any value of anything. Before man came, the same thing would take place if man leaves, if man does things to make himself extinct. I say this to say that just like in chess, if you have an idea of the world and you implement your plans based on that idea of the world and you get killed in the process of that idea, then you've lost. Your idea was bad. The arrangements, the plans, the strategies that you come up with in chess need to be logically consistent. They need to be consistent. Otherwise, you will lose the game. These things are just an arrangements of energies, arrangements of thoughts. If you write a computer program that is supposed to do X and it has this byproduct that is fucking up royally, your logic wasn't right. The idea wasn't right. However you thought about pursuing that idea and the logic that you used in order to make that work wasn't right. It had a flaw in it. Same thing is true with the way we interact with the world. If you're doing something, if you're making a behavior, if you think that something is perfectly okay that is destroying you, then I would argue that that is wrong. Now, this is based on a value system that says that if you lose, if you blink out of existence, then you've done something fundamentally wrong. So this is not God saying X. This is not me telling you that you need to live a particular way. This is me putting a goalpost, a value system, making a judgment saying anything outside the bounds of this that kills you is wrong. I'm just making this point of existence itself being somewhat of a bellwether, meaning I'm planting my ground on keeping us alive, keeping the human race here. And there's a lot of other things you can add to it. I'm just saying from a fundamental basis. Let's start there. You can have any arrangement on this planet that you want, providing, if we're going by that bellwether, if we're going by that stake that's put in the ground, that existence keeps itself intact. You can have any existence that you want, providing you're willing to deal with the consequences of that existence. Now, we have capitalism as being our religious dogma of the time frame. Understand what I'm saying? You have a false ideology. You have something that's based purely on this unrealistic thing of cash, this unreal thing. That's what your society is based on. Status. All of this stuff is not necessarily real, but all of us float and function from the standpoint as if these unreal things are actually real, and that these real things are more important than the human being. We function in a society that in no way takes into account degradation to the environment, destruction to the environment, destruction to us, meaning the diseases and the things that we have to deal with based on the environmental degradation that takes place. Even if you take off the social ills that happens to human beings, the environment by itself is a deal breaker. It's a capitalistic system. There can be no such thing as a capitalism that keeps the environment intact. It doesn't care about those things. The incentives that you build into the system itself are like code for a software program. Human beings being that program itself, running on the code that the cash itself. Meaning, you put an incentive for status and for human beings to have access to more things if they behave a particular way. If the behavior is ghastly, if the behavior allows people to be maniacs and profit off of people being maniacs, then guess what? People are going to be maniacs. You're going to get people doing things that is socially destructive, but is personally wealthy. So yes, if I am an oil company and I know global and climate change is real based on my own scientists going back 40, 50 years, it is profitable to me and to a small 1% of the population to pretend that study didn't exist, to pretend that climate change isn't real, and to profit off of these things, to make massive amounts of cash, pumping massive amounts of stuff into the atmosphere that is screwing over and fucking up the planet. If I know that cigarettes cause cancer, because of my own studies show that cigarettes cause cancer, that is a problem for me. So it is more profitable to me to pretend as if cigarettes don't cause cancer, to buy doctors to get on television, to shame themselves and say that cigarettes don't cause cancer, and to get a little bit of sketchiness in the public, to say that this is a debate, that this is still a debate because one guy says that it doesn't cause cancer versus the hundreds of people who says it does. It's profitable for me to do that, to allow people to continuously have cancer, as opposed to actually taking this product off the market. It is profitable to me individually as a coal worker to keep coal flowing. It is profitable for me as a coal company to keep coal flowing. It is profitable from an oil company. If you're going to profit from something, oftentimes the individual himself who profits will say, fuck the larger society. I am profiting off of this. This is a software that human beings run by. People act as if human beings have free will. Human beings ultimately don't have free will. You're functioning within a society, and based on incentives that are built into society, there's a thread and a push in a particular direction, and oftentimes that push runs counter to what society needs to keep itself intact. You eat a hamburger. Animal agriculture is the second driving force in regards to climate change. You eat a hamburger, this awesome hamburger. That person may have a heart of gold, but that person is contributing to the larger degradation of society itself. The point I'm making is, we live our society in a particular way, and we pretend, because we're normalized, to take on certain things, that these things are normal, these things are okay, as if these things are not instrumental into destroying the habitable space that we inhabit. I haven't even brought in social ills, things that promote wars and everything else. I'm just purely dealing with just one environmental factor, or one factor, the environment. We can't keep going this way. We're killing ourselves. You can go with this idea of the sperm count dropping in Western countries, the nutrition and content of our food being depressed based on the things that we're pumping into the air. We have taken on a particular worldview and a particular idea, and I'm saying that worldview and that idea, some of us, 1% of us profiting magnificently, while everybody else not, like everyone else is not. And us, the 99% being exploited for the wealth of a very few, has allowed the environment also to take a hit for that. Human race is killing itself based on this false idea of profit that doesn't ultimately exist. It's purely a human conception. If human beings blink out of existence, there is no such thing as capitalism. These things are just ideas. They're thought forms. They're an arrangement of energy that we ourselves inhabit this particular space and function in a particular way based upon the contours of that particular thing. The drivers and the social push, the things that the society says is great and awesome and gives status and value to. These are thought forms. These are not natural. That's what I'm saying. Capitalism is not a natural thing. It's something that's created. It's more of a game space. It's a construct. That construct has certain consequences associated with taking a construct in that way. The amount of poverty, like this desperate poverty that's allowed to fester into the planet, even fester in the United States, regardless of what they pretend on mainstream news, these shiny people, look spectacular, telling you things in order to keep a biased opinion of things. The world doesn't have to be this way. The majority of the planet, something like 60%, lives off of $10 a day. Think about that. You have people walking around with $90 billion, and the majority of the planet functions off of $10 a day. A large percentage, $2 a day. The world doesn't have to be this way. This is a choice. This is a choice. Now, I'm saying that to say that the arrangement of energy, the choice that we've taken, is killing us off. Capitalism is not real. It's a choice. It's a model. It's a game space. That model doesn't have to be this way. And it has certain consequences in allowing it to be this way, and that's allowing it to fester. When you plant, let's say you're shipping oranges from Florida, and you're shipping those to somewhere, let's say in Europe, let's say like Spain, to Spain. The company that shipped those in no way takes the environmental impact and toll in the process. It's purely an issue of dollars and cents. If I can get this across there for a particular price, then I'm going to get it there for a particular price. And Spain, who purely has the capacity to grow their own oranges, decide not to because they can ship them in from Florida. Now, this is insanity. You've essentially taken something from one place, shipped it to the next, purely using something that's unreal, cash, as being a pure and sole determining factor on whether or not you want to do that. Environmental toll doesn't count. This is lunacy. This is utter lunacy. You have a habitable space. Scientists are screaming at the top of their lungs that we are killing ourselves. If that habitable space is gone, your profits and all this other stuff don't matter. These things don't matter. The Venus Project is a reimagining of society, looking at the basic thing of sustainability. How do we keep humanity here? We can talk about other stuff, but at the very least, let's start at how do we keep humanity here? Using science and technology as being some of the indicators of what's good and what's bad in regards to our world. Meaning, if we're doing an appraisal and we say, let's say you have an island, and you do an appraisal of that island, and you find that based on our technological development and based on the things that this environment can provide, 10 million people can live on this island. Anything more than that, and you're going to despoil that space, and you can no longer live in that particular habitable zone. And we can arrange ourselves in this particular way to make sure to maximize the benefits of our technology, to make sure that these people can live on this island comfortably. That's not an ideological decision. That's a technological decision. That's a scientific decision. That's something that you're arriving at by the scientific method on what can this particular habitable space sustain. Well, the world is a habitable space also. The world is a finite thing. You can do the same thing with regards to measurements for the planet. We don't do that. We use these as ideological choices. I'm saying the Venus Project takes a scientific approach to figuring out how do we make sure that the human being is taken care of, and how do we make sure that the planet is taken care of, seeing that those things are inextricably linked to one another. How do we make sure that humanity is the point? Life. Humanity is the point. The other stuff is subordinate. How do we make sure that the world that the humanity is living off of prospers, and that the humanity itself prospers? And to do so without having cash as being a determinant factor in those things. They focus on what's called a resource-based economy, with cash not being a part of the process. Roxanne Meadows will be a perfect person to talk to this, as she's worked with Fresco for God knows how long. So she will be here on February the 6th, on Tuesday, 5 p.m. And it should be an amazing conversation. I have questions about the Venus Project, things that I'm curious about and things that I'm somewhat skeptical of. But she is a person to talk to. So I really wish I would have had the opportunity to meet Jack Fresco. And I am saddened by the fact that I haven't been able to meet him. And a lot of the stuff, there's stuff that he's opened my eyes to where I didn't have the perspective before, where I ended up saying, yeah, the guy's right. And he's not just right. He's right not because I believe he's right, if that makes sense. It's like there's sometimes where someone would say something, you either believe it or you don't believe it. It's another thing where your point of view changes. Like how you're looking at it is a thing that is allowing you to arrive at certain conclusions and opinions. It's that, for me. It was that. It was the point of view shifted to some degree that allows certain other things for me to understand or agree or disagree with. She's going to be perfect to listen to for this. So, they're talking about 420. I love this. Do you think the world can be planned out to some utopian like the Venus Project show? Seems pretty silly and idealistic to me. It seems that way to you because this is all you know. I mean, honestly, the day before disclosure. So the day before, it's like the skeptic says UFOs don't exist and all of these things are swamp gas and those things are just planes in the sky. And that person full well believes that because that person lives in a society that told them to believe it. Now he thinks he's believing this because he's an independent thinker and everything else. He's a robot. Most people are robots. To some degree, we're all are robots. The information that's in him is just information that he's been given. He either believes it or he disbelieves it. He doesn't understand that even then, it's just a belief. The day after, a pilot comes out saying, yes, I was chasing a little UFO. Now, this person who was associated with himself with doubters and disbelievers and skeptics now has a problem. Does he change his workable point of view to encounter this? Or does he not change his point of view? But ultimately, these things that he's being hit with, these things are just things he's agreed with or disagreed with. They're things that his society has kind of put into him. It is difficult for an individual to see beyond what your society has driven into you. Sometimes it's driven in explicitly, sometimes it's implicit. Your doubt of something like the Venus Project is purely an implicit bias that you've been built in and associated and sucked up. This is the world that I know. This is the only world that I've known. I've only known disagreement, distraction, competition, etc., etc., etc. I can't see anything beyond this. It's like the slave living in American slave times, and somebody says, yeah, man, one day you may be free. I can't see it. That seems pretty idealistic and silly to me. You would always be a slave. This is just the way the world is. There is no capacity for you to be anything else. I mean, shit, man. You're somewhat of an idiot. You're backwards. That's just us. This is what we are. Think of how insane that is. Think how silly he seems at this moment. The slave telling the other slave in that particular moment that his thinking of freedom is somewhat silly and idealistic. That guy was a silly and idealistic one. Believing that the way the world is, it would always be this way. You're programmed to believe that. The moment that you believe in something else, the world changes. That's the flat fact. That's just what it is. It seems impossible. What you're saying is the rest of the world will not be this way. The fact is that the world changes. The public changes. People change. All of this changes. When people decide, it changes. When people say, you know what, I don't believe we should be living in this particular way, then it changes. All of this stuff are matters of perspective. You're in a society that has poverty that allows for massive amounts of killing and slaughter, where people shoot each other in the face, we put people in cages. Do you know how terrifying that is? That seems normal to you because it's been normalized. That is a terrifying reality. Particularly when you realize it doesn't have to be that way. From a technological standpoint, we have the things that we need to make sure everybody in this world has what they need to survive. We have the technology already. This becomes an issue of choice. Whether it's silly and idealistic, I guess my question would be, why is it idealistic or why is it silly? And I guess the argument is, well, dude, we can never have an arrangement like that. Nobody would ever fall into that. But at least understand that what you're saying is other people just needs to agree. It becomes an issue of agreement. I don't think you can do this overnight. So don't misunderstand me. And it's not some belief that I have that people would just wake up one morning and come into a kumbaya thing. I'm more inclined to believe that society would collapse and fall apart. And that there will be people who, fresh from society collapsing and falling apart and people starving and dying and everybody else, will come to some kind of kumbaya resolution to something like that that ends up with this being a potential. But no, I have no expectation of this taking place now. I think a lot of people would die first. That's grim. That sounds bad. But I think people flow based upon the incentives of a system. I don't know how you jump tracks. I don't know how you jump the track from one track to the next when people have this kind of view of things. Like Copter Force. I think it's silly and idealistic. Well, right. How do you jump tracks? How does that guy realize that that particular point of view is purely driven into him by a system itself to give him that point of view? And that ultimately, if that point of view changes, then the world changes with that particular point of view. You just need a bunch of other people to make that movement. How do you get people to believe in something that is amply possible? But it's only possible if they believe it's possible. You're stuck with this idea of belief, either way. It's kind of like the whole Star Trek future idea. That as human beings, we're going to get past this moment and become something better in the way in which we live and take care of each other. Copter Force, yeah. But in Star Trek thing, the world nearly fell apart. Like before they came to this resolution of having this kind of kumbaya humanistic assumption of things, where the hegemonic view of things is that humanity is important, so we need to respect the man, the person, and the planet that we live on. Sustainability, freedom, a cooperative environment as opposed to a competitive one. Their world fell apart. Like they were at the brink of disaster, meaning the planet, people were blinking out of existence at that point. And it was only then where humanity came to some resolution to things. We're not there yet. Like we're not there at that point where Star Trek was, where everything fell apart. There were still more wars to be fought. There was another world war, this kind of thing where most people were destroyed and killed. That's my belief of things. That things get that bad, that we fall apart, that we get onto the brink and edge of disaster where humanity makes a choice of do we live or do we die. And at that point, where people are fresh from all of the havoc and the shit that's been wrecked, that they say, okay, we don't want that again. And they set the workable point of view into the society to be that way. Once you get that hegemonic viewpoint of society and the society normalizes to that particular thing, then yeah, you get that Star Trek universe and it propagates itself in the same way that this capitalistic system propagates itself. And in that way, those people will look at that particular worldview and would in no way be able to see how we lived in this particular space in this terrifying reality. I don't know how you jump tracks to something like that right away. I always think disaster brings about that type of thing. That sounds grim. That sounds bad. One of my questions to Roxanne was, how do you jump tracks? How do you get people into that particular thing? Now, it's one thing if you had a party that represented a particular interest, and that party had a focus on moving the country in the direction, and you had one win after the next that slowly slid your country into a different direction. You could do that. But that requires winning. That requires winning over a sustained period of time. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you do that. So I am going to leave this here. And this one wasn't meant to be a long one, but I did want to talk about the project itself and how, look, man, we choose. This is us. This is our choice. I don't think we have free will in anything, so I don't necessarily think the choice is made by us. Yes, a human being will make the choice, but that human being has to be able to get above where that human being is. And most point of views don't allow people to remove themselves from the process and figure out what's them versus what's not them. And arguably, I don't think there's a difference between what's them and what's not them. It's besides the point. My point is, Roxanne will be here on February 6th, 5 p.m. Eastern. If you have your questions, Copter, feel free to ask her your questions. That's why she'll be here. I think it should be interesting. I am fucking amazingly looking forward to this. So yeah, I look forward to this. I think it's going to be a great interview. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks guys. I think I have one or two more coming up behind this, so I'll see you guys in a few.